Fulvia works with us at the Kids Research Institute, and her daughter Teah is here tonight, so they're going to share their story. I ask you to listen closely. Their story is really powerful and moving, so I'll pass you on to Fulvia now.
Thanks, Dad. Okay. Yeah, it is quite sobering, but I think it's necessary. Good evening, everyone. Firstly, I'd like to say how incredibly grateful I am to be asked to speak by Jacob at such an inspirational event. Jacob, you are an exceptionally giving man, working for an incredible cause which needs people like you, and I thank you for this opportunity. Oh no, I'm not sad music. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Fulvia, and I work at the Kids Research Institute, and excuse me for reading, but I wouldn't be able to do it any other way. I'm in the community engagement team. You'll find me at the welcome desk on the ground floor if you wanted to stop by and say hi. I work there with Juliet, and we look after the desk and concierge people coming through, and we also look after the Discovery Centre and the volunteers. I've been at the Institute for less than a year, but I always knew I'd really find my way there, in one way or another. After 30 years of teaching children in primary schools, I had a sea change and chose to work with the kids. You may be wondering why I'm standing here. Well, of all of the roles in my life, the most important role has been that of a mother. And about 20 years ago, on the 6th of October 2004, my role as a mother became one of the hardest gigs of my life. After 3 weeks and numerous visits to various doctors and hospitals, and not being able to distinguish what was wrong with my little girl Teah, not so little now, who spent most of the day screaming and the rest of it completely passed out asleep, we were told, we have some bad news. Your daughter has a tennis ball-sized brain tumour at the base of her brain. Those words will be forever etched in my memory. To be honest, the moments that followed were to me in slow motion. I remember my mouth being stuck open in a gasp. My fingers were splayed and stiff and stuck in that position. Saliva was escaping out of my mouth and I couldn't control it, down my chin, and I made most revolting guttural sounds that I don't know where they came from. It was absolutely incomprehensible. I felt completely broken, as if someone had taken to me with a sledgehammer. I'm here tonight to give you a parent's perspective on Teah's cancer journey. Her journey to fight and survive medulloblastoma in her posterior fossa. This is totally my perspective, and I don't pretend for 1 minute that as parents we suffered the most. The person who suffered the most was absolutely and without a doubt our daughter Teah. Teah was 2.5 years old at the time, and looking back there were some signs, but none of which were recognised as a brain tumour. Diminished speech, unsteady on her feet, incessant screaming when she lay down due to the intense headaches. I remember being asked by Dr. Baker if I suffered from migraines, which I do. And he said to me, what she's been experiencing would be 10 times worse than you will ever experience with migraines. Teah's symptoms at first were intermittent. This was because the tumour would float and at times wouldn't produce any symptoms. However, when the tumour rested at the base of her brain, blocking the flow of cerebral spinal fluid, the pressure which built around her brain was excruciating. This made perfect sense now that we knew what was happening, as before diagnosis, we hadn't understood why there were no symptoms at the times we'd taken her to the doctor to get checked out. It was only when her condition deteriorated significantly that the doctors in ED were able to diagnose her after the suspicions of a brain tumour were confirmed with an MRI. On that night, we were told that Teah was slipping into a coma. They said 24 more hours undiagnosed and she would be gone. They pumped her with drugs to stop the brain from swelling and swelling even more, and prepped her for surgery. The next day, Teah endured a 6.5-hour operation to resect the tumour from her brain, which thank goodness was totally encapsulated and had not spread to the spine or any other organs. I remember Wayne Thomas, the surgeon, now a legendary surgeon who's now retired, going through the risks of the operations with us the night before, telling us there was a very good chance that she would bleed out during the operation. Tumours of this size are extremely vascular. Martin and I made a pact that night, Martin's my husband at the back, that no matter how scared we were the next day, we were going to pass on a positive attitude as we kissed her and told her we'd be waiting for her in the next room. We knew positivity wasn't going to cure her, but we wanted our demeanour to give her the best chance of subconsciously fighting while she was under. Those 6.5 hours were the start of endless hours of excruciating heartache and worry, which we endured for the next 16 months and beyond. We were ushered into ICU ahead of her return from surgery and couldn't believe what we could hear coming down the corridor from theatre. Teah was screaming, "I want pizza!" over and over again. Something she had never asked for in her life, and in a manner we had never heard, full of determination to get this pizza. Teah hadn't been talking much the previous month or so, and certainly hadn't been making any demands for food. She'd been very disinterested in food. Could it be that the tumour had diminished her speech and her appetite? We later found out that this exactly was the case. After Teah spent 12 days in ICU with a brain infection, we accepted the offer of a trial protocol, which we knew nothing about, but we could see that the oncology team strongly believed was the best option. Treatment for Teah comprised of the initial operation, 6 months of intensive chemotherapy, where her body was poisoned, and she subsequently became neutropenic with no immunity and ended up in hospital very ill every month with infections. After the initial 6 months of chemo, she received 32 consecutive days of radiation therapy at Sir Charles Gardner Hospital every morning at 8:45. Because she was only 3 and radiation has to be delivered with pinpoint accuracy, she was given a general anaesthetic every day for 32 days to ensure that she kept still. After this, another 6 months of intensive chemotherapy. I worked out at the time that at the end of her treatment, in total, she'd spent 75% of those 16 months in a hospital bed, most often in isolation. Bear in mind that Monique, our other beautiful daughter, was only 4.5 at the time of Teah's diagnosis and had to accept that we could not be together as a family for extended periods of time. Monique's life became a merry-go-round of family and friends picking her up from kindy and taking her on play dates, feeding her and bringing her to the hospital daily to see us. Monique was always an extremely intuitive child who chose to never put any pressure on us to give her any more attention than we could afford at the time. I can proudly say that Monique has gone on to become an exceptional and resilient registered nurse after her extended exposure to Teah's journey. In her own life, Monique has had her own challenges, and she continues to deal with the hardship with maturity well beyond her years and a zest for life which enables her to find the positives in every situation. You are truly amazing, Monique. I remember looking at Teah at the end of treatment and thinking it was hard to imagine she was ever going to come back from this battering. As my husband Martin often says, she needed to be taken to the brink of death in order to kill the cancer. It's a pretty terrifying and harrowing story for anyone to hear, let alone go through, and I've only touched on the treatment. But believe it or not, we feel like we won the lottery. Teah not only came back from the brink of death, but grew and thrived to be the most beautiful child and now woman. She has tackled her fight with determination and a feisty attitude. She is grateful and kind, clever and driven, and she is here living a full life, even though life continues to serve her challenges. We count our blessings every single day. We are in awe of you, Teah. What you have endured and what you have become. I often think of you in that hospital bed, and I sometimes allow myself to see you in my mind's eye. Pale and bald, with eyes that were pleading for some kind of explanation from her mummy. But most of the time, I remember you standing on that hospital bed dancing to the music from your Walkman, and while the nurses danced around your bed too. and while being administered chemo, lines coming out of all your tiny little veins. This is what I think about when I'm worried that you might find things tough as an adult. I think of you on that bed dancing. It reminds me of everything you've thought, and your fighting spirit is part of who you are. You continue to be truly amazing, Teah, and we're so incredibly proud of you. About halfway through treatment, we were entering PMH one morning to be admitted because Teah had a high fever due to an infection, and I saw one of Teah's doctors, head oncologist at the time, David Baker, walking across the road to Roberts Road, opposite the old PMH site. He didn't see us, and he was in a hurry, and I watched him enter the building I knew nothing about. I wondered where he was going. After asking one of the nurses about the building, she named it as Telethon Kids Research Institute, of course now known as the Kids Research Institute Australia. Little did I know that the people working tirelessly in this building were responsible for the treatment plan that had been designed for Teah, based on vital research and consultation. Over time and some further investigation, I came to realise that we had a lot more people to be thankful for. I realised that Teah's care was delivered by a village of people who lived and breathed for her. People like Dr. Nick, who we used to call Saint Nick, I'm sure you've heard it before, who delivered her treatment and looked over her, and in fact came back from America towards the end of her treatment. After 20 years, he's still there, with many others like Raylene and everyone else in the team, to continue this plight. I've watched from afar as teams such as the Brain Tumour Research Program led by Raylene and Nick have worked selflessly to lead so many researchers to find alternative treatments and realise the dream of being able to treat cure brain cancer in children and yet minimise the side and late effects of treatment. You see, cancer journey doesn't stop at the end of treatment. The after effects are often life-altering and devastating for the survivor, leaving everyone feeling so very conflicted emotionally, feeling so incredibly grateful and yet so resentful as the after effects just keep coming. Despite the enormous amount of work that's been done in this area of research, unfortunately, survival rates have hardly improved in 20 years. The effects of treatment continue to be harrowing and lifelong. Researchers at the Kids Institute are working around the clock to improve protocols through endless studies into the use of immunotherapy, better diagnostic techniques and alternative treatment regimes. They know what they need to do. They know what it takes, and they're determined to make it happen. As a parent, how do you acknowledge this work? How do you thank these warriors who in essence saved your daughter? You can send them notes of thanks, buy them gifts, name them on social media as your saviours, but that's not nearly enough. And that's why I'm standing here on behalf of my family, reliving one of the most harrowing times in our lives, allowing the memories to come, the pain to be felt, and the gratitude to pour out, to say thank you for all that you do and all those before you have done, and that all the things you continue to do. It's the least I can do to be here. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Teah Stanford. I am proud to stand before you today and call myself a cancer survivor. In most cases, I don't usually share this with people. It's not really something most people know how to respond to, nor is it something that I want a lot of people to know about me. It's a very personal thing. However, tonight I feel like it's an important thing to share with you all. My cancer journey, which started over 20 years ago when I was only 2 years old. Surviving brain cancer alone, yet at the age of 2, is a miracle. As my mum just said, we literally won the lottery. However, after the immense pain and struggles that I faced in hospital, it didn't end there, and kept coming along after the 2 battling years I lived in Princess Margaret Hospital. Because I was so young during my treatment, a lot of what happened didn't make much sense to me. and thankfully, being so young, I don't remember a lot of it. However, still to this day, I have constant reminders and lifelong challenges. Although Mum and Dad were told there would be late effects and they knew there would be challenges going forward, there were so many unknowns, and they have unravelled as time's gone on. Some things are harder to grasp than others, and I have good and bad days of dealing with them. It took me a while to fully understand and comprehend what actually happened to my brain. It wasn't until my teenage years when I really understood how seriously life-threatening having cancer was. This was when a lot of the after effects became more noticeable to me, and I started experiencing severe anxiety and depression. Initially, I had gone into puberty super early, but the doctors had to interrupt it with drugs to enable me to grow. When doctors were happy with my growth, I was then allowed to naturally resume puberty myself, but unfortunately, that wasn't easy. Throughout my teenage years, it's hard enough juggling school and having a developing body. I struggled a lot more than my peers as content got harder and harder, so adjustments to my learning needs were made specific for me. During tests or assessments, I was quite often given a little extra time to complete set tasks. As a teenager, you're self-conscious enough about being different, so when you hear your peers say things like, "I don't know why she gets extra time, my uncle had cancer and he's just fine," really doesn't help. The unfortunate fact is that most people are not aware of the many late effects of childhood cancer treatment, particularly if it occurs in your formative years. Obviously, survival is the #1 goal when being treated for cancer, and I'll be forever grateful that I made it through. I'm here not to complain about the hardships I faced as a result of this disease or the treatment I received. I'm simply here to build awareness around the facts that surviving childhood cancer is not the end of the story, and 20 years on, the statistics around survivorship and late effects have barely changed. Despite the endless efforts of researchers who tirelessly work to improve the treatments for medulloblastoma, so much more needs to be done, and the only way that can happen is through greater awareness. As I come to the end of my story tonight, I want to leave you with some of the late effects that I and many childhood cancer survivors still struggle with today. Hearing loss and vision loss, permanent hair loss, puberty and growth issues, memory loss, auditory processing issues, adrenal insufficiency, balance issues, pituitary insufficiency, infertility and reproductive issues, anxiety and depression, and pre-diabetes. Yes, the list is long, but the #1 effect or takeaway, if you like, from my whole experience is the tremendous amount of gratitude I have for people like Jacob, who make it their lifelong mission to improve outcomes of children who walk through those doors through the doors of the hospital. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fulvia and Teah. It's hard not to shed some tears listening to